All right, let's talk about one of the most incredible, almost mythical figures in the history of finance, Jesse Livermore. His story, you'll see, is just this wild ride of unbelievable genius and, well, heartbreaking tragedy. I mean, just let that sink in for a second. We're not talking about just making a lot of money. We're talking about reaching the absolute peak of wealth, $1 billion in today's money, over and over again, and then watching it all just vanish. That's the life of the man they called the Great Bear of Wall Street. So, you might be wondering, where does a guy like that even come from? Well, his journey to becoming a Wall Street legend didn't start at some fancy university. It started on a farm, with him basically running away from a life he knew wasn't for him. And the speed at which this all happened is just mind-blowing. Think about it. He's born in 1877 to a poor family, supposed to be a farmer, but at 14, he says, no way, and takes off for Boston with just 5 books to his name. And a year later, at only 15, he's already trading and realizing he has this uncanny, natural gift for seeing patterns in the numbers. Now, to really get his start, you have to know what a bucket shop was. These weren't like the New York Stock Exchange we think of today. No, they were basically betting parlors. You weren't actually buying a piece of a company, you were placing a bet against the house on whether a stock's price would go up or down. For a kid who saw the world in numbers and patterns, this was the ultimate playground. And he got so good so quickly and was so unafraid to make these huge bets that he earned himself a nickname, the Boy Plunger. It just perfectly captures his whole vibe, right? Young, aggressive, and totally confident in his own reads. And the crazy thing is, most of the time, he was spot on. So after basically getting banned from the bucket shops for winning too much, Livermore moved up to the big time. And this is where he would make history, not by riding the wave up with everyone else, but by having the vision to see the tidal wave coming when everyone else was still partying on the beach. His first really legendary move came during the Panic of 1907. While the rest of the country was in a total meltdown, fortunes getting wiped out left and right, Livermore did the craziest thing imaginable. He bet against the market. He shorted stocks, and in the middle of all that chaos, he made an absolute fortune. But you know what? 1907 was really just the opening act. His true masterpiece, the trade that made him a legend, was this: $100 million. That's what he made during the Great Crash of 1929. How? By doing it again, shorting the market as it fell off a cliff. We're talking about over $1 billion in today's money, from one event. And let's be totally clear, this wasn't just some lucky win. This was, at the time, the single largest profit ever made by one person from trading. Ever. He literally became known as the man who broke the market. He timed the most famous crash in history perfectly. So the question is, how on earth did he do it? Was he just the luckiest guy on the planet? Not a chance. Behind all those gutsy moves was a really sharp, surprisingly disciplined philosophy, one that traders, even today, still swear by. And this really gets to the heart of his genius. He saw the market for what it really is, a giant reflection of human emotion. It's all just fear and greed playing out on a massive scale. And he knew that the key to winning was to understand what the crowd was feeling, but to never, ever let yourself feel it with them. His whole strategy was built on these core ideas. He wasn't just randomly guessing. He was a master of patience. He would find a big, powerful trend, and then he would just wait and wait for that one perfect moment to jump in. And the most important part? He traded with his brain, never with his gut. In fact, his insights were so profound that they became the basis for this legendary book, Reminiscences of a Stock Operator. Seriously, you can go to any trading floor on Wall Street right now, 100 years later, and you will find people who call this book their Bible. That's how powerful his ideas were. But this is where the story gets dark. Because the same man who could so brilliantly master the psychology of millions of people in the market, it turns out, couldn't master his own. Because for all of the genius, for all of the incredible success, his life is also a huge cautionary tale. It turns out all those rules he had for the market, patience, discipline, emotional control, he just couldn't apply them to his own life. And right here, this is the fundamental conflict of his entire existence. You had Livermore, the genius trader, logical, fearless, a master of patterns. But then you had Livermore, the man, someone who was tormented by depression, who lacked discipline in his personal life, and who made the exact kind of emotional decisions he warned everyone else against. So the decade right after his greatest triumph was just a slow, painful fall. He kept making and losing fortunes, but the losses started to hurt more. His personal life was a mess, and that depression that was always kind of there in the background, well, it completely took over. And in 1940, at 63 years old, Jesse Livermore took his own life. So what are we supposed to make of a story like that, with such incredible highs and such devastating lows? What's the final lesson we can pull from the life of Jesse Livermore? I think it really boils down to two things. First, there's this incredible story of potential. His life proves that sheer brilliance and courage can completely rewrite your destiny. But then, there's the catch. And the catch is that all the genius in the world means nothing without the personal discipline to manage it, not just in your work, but in your life. And that's really the paradox of his life, isn't it? He became a legend because he had the courage to think differently from everyone else. And he became a tragedy because, in the end, he couldn't stop his own emotions from controlling him. His story really leaves us with this huge, important question. What really matters more in the long run? A dazzling moment of pure genius, or the quiet, steady, day in and day out effort of a lifetime of discipline? It's something to think about.